Hello and welcome back to Sharks Happen. And on today's episode we're going to go over attacks on surfers, on a swimmer, a couple of spear fishermen, and we're going to end the show with a bite to the face, which you don't hear all the time. So stick around, this is going to be a great show. Okay, now we're going to start out over at Crescent Beach, and that is in Florida, and the date is August 31st of 2011. Shane Lancaster, he is 19 years old. He was doing some late morning surfing and he ended up in knee-deep water at 11 o'clock. Doesn't say how far from shore he ended up being, but he ends up being dragged. He falls off of his board, so he must have finished taking a wave in. He says as soon as he got into the water, a shark went ahead, bit him in the leg, and then swam off. It doesn't even sound like it shook him. So he goes in, they get him in for treatment. They find that he has 6 puncture wounds from teeth to the front of his leg, to the calf, and then on the back of his calf there's 22 puncture wounds. They didn't identify the shark. He said that it was about 6 feet long. You know, they're on boards, they're pretty close to 6 feet. You know, usually they're somewhere in the range from 6 feet to 8 feet is what I normally see. The older ones, it seems they used to be like 10 footers, big long ones. But you know, if you've got a shark that's pretty close to the size of your board, it's kind of hard not to know what size it was. So we're going to put this one into the stats as an attack, not an attempt to predate, but I don't know what kind of shark it would be. They, it's in Florida, it's black tip, could be I don't think it could be a lemon because of the teeth, but it could be a black tip, it could be one of those spinners, or even a bull shark. The teeth are hard to tell by. It sounds like with the teeth though that they should have an identification of the shark, but who knows. 22 teeth marks in the bottom of the leg makes me think ragged tooth shark with a ton of those little teeth sticking out, which would be a sand tiger. So we'll put this down as a 6-foot shark, don't know what kind. Okay, now we're going to head over to Waialua Beach, and that is over in Kauai, Hawaii, and the date is November 12th of 1993. David Silva, he is 31 years old and he was out surfing. It's about just before 11 o'clock and he's got himself 75 yards offshore in 15-foot deep water, and suddenly he's grabbed by the leg by a shark, and the shark grabs him, bites him on the knee, so above and below the knee, so he gets the knee right inside the shark's mouth, it sounds like, and the shark quickly releases him and swims off. David says he thinks that, his board was yellow and he was on there paddling, so it probably thought he was a turtle. I think that's ridiculous. A lot of people say that these sharks can't see colors, they can only see contrast. That takes colors of animals right out of there. So if you're the color of a turtle, it ain't gonna matter. If you're the color of a wetsuit, it doesn't matter, because if they're seeing contrast, it's not gonna be able to decipher between the two. So that's out of the question, unless they can see color, which I'm sure, well, I'm saying that hasn't been proven either way yet, and I don't know how they would to prove that they can see clearly and see colors. But I don't think that it thought he was a turtle. I think it came up and did what a tiger shark does. You ended up by that tiger shark and it decided you're on the surface, it wants to see what it is. Took a bite, wasn't trying to eat, wasn't clamping down. It was just, seems to be one of those bites that they do when you have something floating on the surface, testing trash, all kinds of things. So they'll try to bite it. If you have a bucket floating in the water, you have a pallet out there that fell off a ship, they'll probably bite that too. Tigers are indiscriminate testers of whatever's floating on top of the water, and over in Hawaii I'm sure that happens quite often. They said it's a tiger shark. Don't know what size tiger shark. It doesn't sound like it was too large. I'm thinking probably around somewhere in the 6 to 8 foot range. So we are going to put it in the books. We're going to put it down as an attack, not an attempt to predate by a tiger shark. We just don't know what size. Okay, now we're going to head over to Fairhaven Beach. That is in Australia, and the date is November 29th of 1959. Chris Holland, he is 19 years old and he is a life server on the beach, and it just starts to rain. It's about 2:55, it's almost 3 o'clock. Starts raining and the lifeguards decide it's not worth staying on watch. With it raining, nobody's using the water. So 4 or 5 of them end up going into the water. They're gonna body surf it. There's some good waves for body surfing, and they enter the water. And now at 2:45, Chris Holland has himself 100 yards from shore, no telling on the depth, and he gets hit by a shark. Shark grabs him, and there's a friend that is about 10 yards away, but the shark grabs onto Chris and drags him under the water. Sounds like most of the people headed to the beach. The shark has him, and now Chris says he looks down in the water and he could see the shark's mouth around his right thigh. So the teeth are in his right thigh and the back of his left thigh. So it sounds like it's got both of his legs, and most of the teeth are going into the right thigh. He reaches his hand down to pry the shark's, the right hand I believe it is, down to pry the shark's mouth open, lacerating his hand pretty badly. Shark lets go and swims off. Another friend of his, Bruce, I believe his name is, he swims over and he tows him into shore. They get him in. He ends up surviving this attack, even though he had tissue loss to the right thigh. He had damage to the left thigh from teeth marks, and then he had his hand with his defensive wounds. There was no identification of the shark made either by teeth fragments or by the witnesses, so all they know is this is about an 11-foot shark, a 3.5-meter shark. So an 11-foot shark was on his leg, and he had to try to pry that thing off of him. Successfully does so, loses some of his thigh on the way, but he ends up surviving. Put this down as an attack, not an attempt to predate. We don't know what kind of shark, 11 feet. Okay, now we're going to head over to San Pedro Island, and that is in Mexico, and the date is June 14th of 1959. Francisco Topete, he is a guide hired by 3 fishermen to help them find fish over off of San Pedro Island, and it sounds like they were heading out, boat capsizes. So now the 4 men have to do a 300-yard, they're capsized 300 yards off the island, so they have to make that swim back to the island, and Francisco is attacked by a shark and mauled so badly that the Americans could not help him. It sounds like they just swam the rest of their way into shore, and Francisco was not recovered. Odd thing about this story is a lot of people were saying that it was a bull sea lion that killed him, so that'd be the first time I heard of a bull sea lion grabbing somebody and, you know, injuring them so bad that they're not going to be able to live. I know people get bit by them and that they're not fun, and I just don't think that they could do much damage other that they would even bother unless you're by their kids. But it's funny that they kind of thought that this was a sea lion, because it's definitely a shark attack. I mean, it's 100% a shark attack in my book. So we're going to put this down as an attack and a predation. We don't know what kind of shark or sharks that got a hold of them. I would think it's one shark because the other men swam to safety without a problem, and if there was a bunch of sharks in the area or multiple sharks and one of them starts feeding, it might send the other ones into a frenzy type situation. So I think this was a sole shark that took them. Attack, predation, don't know what kind of shark. Okay, now we're going to head over to Juno Beach. That is in Florida. The date on this is March 26th of 2000. Heather Van Olst, 14 years old. She is out doing some boogie boarding with friends and family, and they're all out in the water. It's about 11:15 in the morning. She is 150 yards from shore, no telling of the depth of water, when suddenly a shark grabs her by her knee and almost pulls her off her board. She had to hold onto her board to keep from it pulling her underwater. She said she looked down and she could see the shark on her leg, so she kicked out and the shark left her alone, and then she went to paddle her way in, but she couldn't kick her leg, so her brother and I believe her brother's friend came over and they brought her into shore. She went in and it was a single bite to the knee. Not sure if it did much shaking at all, but the damage was just unbelievable. She had over 400 stitches to be able to close up this wound. They can't tell whether it was a black tip, a spinner, or a bull shark that got a hold of her, which is, you know, I need to, maybe I'll pull up and put in the teeth of these sharks and we'll be able to see the differences in them. But, you know, once it's an open flap of skin, then telling teeth from other teeth, it's pretty much useless, and I think that's what happens most of the time with these attacks. I mean, the tough thing is like in Jack Roche's attack, where it's right below his butt in the middle of his calf. So if he's my height, that's it's about a 2.5 foot bite, maybe a little bit more, and they're wide open. They're big open cuts, so you got to assume that the shark teeth went in pretty much in the center of them, because they spread out once they're cut by teeth like that. So you know, it's odd that they don't try to use DNA to find out what sharks are doing to biting. But, you know, this is Florida, and you're pretty much in there, you're pretty much bait. When you're in the water in Florida, there's too many small sharks that are hunting in that water that I wouldn't want to be in it. Fairly deep. I mean, even if you're in there 3 feet, these little 6-footers can get at you. So, you know, you're not going to lose your life, and you're usually not going to lose any limbs, maybe some fingers or toes or something, but they don't usually remove hands and things like that. But if you run into one of those bigger sharks, you know, they could possibly do that. So that's our attack on Heather Van Olst. An attack, not an attempt to predate. They said the shark was about 6.5 feet. So 6.5-foot shark, we just don't know what kind. Okay, now we're going to finish out our unprovoked attacks over off of Kalama Beach Park, and that is in Hawaii, and the date is October 19th, 2009. Scott Henrich, he is 54 years old, and he is out doing some morning surfing. He's got himself on his board, sitting on his board. He is 100 to 300 yards from shore in approximately 6-foot deep water. And it's 6 o'clock in the morning, and sunrise is at 6:20. So you're talking dusk. It's probably light, but very little. And he is sitting on his board, and suddenly a shark comes up and clamps on his leg. And it clamps on his thigh. It sounds like it's his right thigh. And he sits there and he punched a shark, he said, twice in the head, and the shark let go of him. He said the shark's head was 2 feet wide. And he knocks the shark off. Somehow it got his ankle too, so he ended up with wounds to his right ankle and to his thigh. So either it bit him before it made its way up, or the teeth raked it as it was swinging back away, but they don't explain what happened there. He ends up out, he was out there, and the only other person out there was somebody in a surf ski, and that gentleman saw the attack and went over to tow him in. But Scott said that he grabbed a wave to head in to speed up his own rescue. So he takes a wave in. Now his car is 350 yards from where he's at. He has to hobble his way to his car and drive himself to go get help. He ends up with 100 stitches, and he gets this repaired. They ruled out that this would be from a tiger shark. They said that this was probably a reef shark, either a sandbar shark, a black tip, or a white tip shark. So not one of the big three that got a hold of him, and that would make sense as it's dusk. The big ones that we pay attention to, I don't think they go by this schedule. They're in shallow waters probably more than they would be in the morning and at night, checking on whatever fish are going in there. But you don't get a ton of attacks in the mornings like this or at dusk by the large sharks, where you'll get the black tips, and the ones that are in there feeding, they're actually in there as a routine. They're always in there trying to find their fish, and you're likely to get bit by one of those, you know, and could have just been a territorial attack to get him out of the way, get him out of their waters. That's what I would put it down as. So we'll put this down as an attack and not an attempt to predate. We don't know what kind of shark, a reef shark. Okay, before we get into the end of the show, you don't hear that every day. I wanted to just say that the Etsy store is open. That sharkshappen2.etsy.com, 2 T-O-O. And the Sharks Happen website will be reopened when I return back from Florida. That's probably going to be March 13th, somewhere around there. We are going to head over to Gnaraloo, G-N-A-R-A-L-O-O, and that is over in Western Australia. The date on this was August 16th of 2014. Adam Haling, he is 31 years old, and he was out doing some spearfishing. And it's about 2:30. He has just speared himself a fish, and he's swimming it back to shore. And now he's in 8 feet of water, no telling how far from shore, but he's in 8 feet deep water thereabouts, swimming a fish to shore. And suddenly a shark, a reef shark, shows up and just clamps on his face. That's the first thing he sees, is a shark is on his face. The top teeth luckily went into the mask he was wearing. The bottom teeth, though, they ended up going down below his chin, and then the shark bit down, which took its mask down, but put the teeth up into his chin, up into his neck. So after the shark let go of Adam's face, he said that he was holding on to his neck to keep the blood flow down and keep his skin there, because he said that his face was starting to feel loose. The shark's doing a slow circle around him, and now he's saying, well, you know, I may be done now. And finally the shark goes down, grabs the fish, and disappears. He swims his way in, and now he's got to make his way to his car. And he's saying that his face is feeling looser and looser, and he's getting lightheaded. He ends up getting saved. He ends up getting in and getting his wounds taken care of, bites to the face and to the neck. So, you know, when it hit him in the face, it obviously did cut him in the face, but he had the neck wounds too, which were probably the ones he was worried about mostly. He gets attacked by what they say is a reef shark. I don't know what size it is. I doubt he really got a good look at it after being bit in the face by it. Right there, I mean, I think all senses of what has just hit you out the window. You're not really concerned about length of the shark. You're just concerned about what it's going to do. And so we put this in our attack files as an attack, not an attempt to predate by a reef shark. We just don't know what size, and that's our show for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you'll be back in a few more days for another show of new attacks like we have. New old attacks, I should say. We never do new attacks unless they're non-fatal or they're all over the place like Simon Nellist was. I have too much catching up to do to try to, and I don't want to, you know, be out there trying to break news. Not my kind of thing. I just want to know as much as I can about what these sharks, what's motivating them, and things like that. So that's our show for today. And remember, if you go into the water, you are much more afraid of those sharks than they are of you.